The Coming of Maximín by Arthur Conan Doyle. Many are the strange vicissitudes of history. Greatness has often sunk to the dust and has tempered itself to its new surrounding. Smallness has risen aloft, has flourished for a time, and then has sunk once more. Rich monarchs have become poor monks, brave conquerors have lost their manhood, eunuchs and women have overthrown armies and kingdoms. Surely there is no situation which the mind of man can invent, which has not taken shape and been played out upon the world's stage. But of all the strange careers and of all the wondrous happenings, stranger than Charles in his monastery or Justin on his throne, there stands the case of giant Maximín, what he attained and how he attained it. Let me tell the sober facts of history, tinged only by that coloring to which the more austere historians could not condescend. It is a record as well as a story. In the heart of Thrace, some 10 miles north of the Rhodope Mountains, there is a valley which is named Harpessus, after the stream which runs down it. Through this valley lies the main road from the east to the west, and along the road, returning from an expedition against the Alani, there marched, upon the 5th day of the month of June in the year 210, a small but compact Roman army. It consisted of 3 legions, the Jovian, the Cappadocian, and the men of Hercules. 10 turmi of Gallic cavalry led the van, whilst the rear was covered by a regiment of Batavian horse guards, the immediate attendants of the Emperor Septimus Severus, who had conducted the campaign in person. The peasants who lined the low hills which fringed the valley looked with indifference upon the long files of dusty, heavily burdened infantry, but they broke into murmurs of delight at the gold-faced cuirasses and high brazen horsehair helmets of the guardsmen, applauding their stalwart figures, their martial bearing, and the stately black chargers which they rode. A soldier might know that it was the little weary men with their short swords, their heavy pikes over their shoulders, and their square shields slung upon their backs, who were the real terror of the enemies of the empire. But to the eyes of the wondering Thracians, it was this troop of glittering Apollos who bore Rome's victory upon their banners, and upheld the throne of the purple-togaed prince who rode before them. Among the scattered groups of peasants who looked on from a respectful distance at this military pageant, there were 2 men who attracted much attention from those who stood immediately around them. The one was commonplace enough, a little gray-headed man, with uncouth dress and a frame which was bent and warped by a long life of arduous toil, goat driving and wood chopping among the mountains. It was the appearance of his youthful companion which had drawn the amazed observation of the bystanders. In stature he was such a giant as is seen but once or twice in each generation of mankind. 8 feet and 2 inches was his measure from his sandaled sole to the topmost curls of his tangled hair. Yet for all his mighty stature, there was nothing heavy or clumsy in the man. His huge shoulders bore no redundant flesh, and his figure was straight and hard and supple as a young pine tree. A frayed suit of brown leather clung close to his giant body, and a cloak of undressed sheepskin was slung from his shoulder. His bold blue eyes, shock of yellow hair and fair skin, showed that he was of Gothic or northern blood, and the amazed expression upon his broad, frank face as he stared at the passing troops told of a simple and uneventful life in some back valley of the Macedonian mountains. "I fear your mother was right when she advised that we keep you at home," said the old man anxiously. "Tree cutting and wood carrying will seem but dull work after such a sight as this." "When I see mother next, it will be to put a golden torque round her neck," said the young giant. "And you, Daddy, I will fill your leather pouch with gold pieces before I have done." The old man looked at his son with startled eyes. "You would not leave us, Thecla. What could we do without you?" "My place is down among yonder men," said the young man. "I was not born to drive goats and carry logs, but to sell this manhood of mine in the best market. There is my market in the Emperor's own guard. Say nothing, Daddy, for my mind is set, and if you weep now, it will be to laugh hereafter. I will to great Rome with the soldiers." The daily march of the heavily laden Roman legionary was fixed at 20 miles. But on this afternoon, though only half the distance had been accomplished, the silver trumpets blared out their welcome news that a camp was to be formed. As the men broke their ranks, the reason of their light march was announced by the decurions. It was the birthday of Geta, the younger son of the emperor, and in his honor there would be games and a double ration of wine. But the iron discipline of the Roman army required that under all circumstances certain duties should be performed, and foremost among them that the camp should be made secure. Laying down their arms in the order of their ranks, the soldiers seized their spades and axes, and worked rapidly and joyously until sloping vallum and gaping fossa girdled them round, and gave them safe refuge against a night attack. Then, in noisy, laughing, gesticulating crowds, they gathered in their thousands round the grassy arena where the sports were to be held. A long green hillside sloped down to a level plain, and on this gentle incline the army lay watching the strife of the chosen athletes who contended before them. They stretched themselves in the glare of the sunshine, their heavy tunics thrown off, and their naked limbs sprawling, wine cups and baskets of fruit and cakes circling amongst them, enjoying rest and peace as only those can to whom it comes so rarely. The 5-mile race was over, and had been won as usual by Decurion Brennus, the crack long-distance champion of the Herculeans. Amid the yells of the Jovians, Capelus of the corps had carried off both the long and the high jump. Big Brebix, the Gaul, had outthrown the long guardsman Serenus with the 50-pound stone. Now, as the sun sank towards the western ridge and turned the Harpessus to a riband of gold, they had come to the final of the wrestling, where the pliant Greek, whose name is lost in the nickname of Python, was tried out against the bull-necked lictor of the military police, a hairy Hercules, whose heavy hand had in the way of duty oppressed many of the spectators. As the two men, stripped save for their loincloths, approached the wrestling ring, cheers and countercheers burst from their adherents, some favoring the lictor for his Roman blood, some the Greek from their own private grudge. And then, of a sudden, the cheering died, heads were turned towards the slope away from the arena, men stood up and peered and pointed, until finally, in a strange hush, the whole great assembly had forgotten the athletes, and were watching a single man walking swiftly towards them down the green curve of the hill. This huge solitary figure, with the oaken club in his hand, the shaggy fleece flapping from his great shoulders, and the setting sun gleaming upon a halo of golden hair, might have been the tutelary god of the fierce and barren mountains from which he had issued. Even the emperor rose from his chair and gazed with open-eyed amazement at the extraordinary being who approached him. The man, whom we already know as Thecla the Thracian, paid no heed to the attention which he had aroused, but strode onwards, stepping as lightly as a deer, until he reached the fringe of the soldiers. Amid their open ranks he picked his way, sprang over the ropes which guarded the arena, and advanced towards the emperor, until a spear at his breast warned him that he must go no nearer. Then he sunk upon his right knee and called out some words in the Gothic speech. "Great Jupiter, whoever saw such a body of a man?" cried the emperor. "What says he? What is amiss with the fellow? Whence comes he, and what is his name?" An interpreter translated the barbarian's answer. "He says, Great Caesar, that he is of good blood, and sprung by a Gothic father from a woman of the Alani. He says that his name is Thecla, and that he would fain carry a sword in Caesar's service." The emperor smiled. Some post could surely be found for such a man, were it but as janitor at the Palatine Palace, said he to one of the prefects. "I would fain see him walk even as he is through the forum. He would turn the heads of half the women in Rome. Talk to him, Crassus, you know his speech." The Roman officer turned to the giant. "Caesar says that you are to come with him, and he will make you the servant at his door." The barbarian rose, and his fair cheeks flushed with resentment. "I will serve Caesar as a soldier," said he, "but I will be house servant to no man, not even to him. If Caesar would see what manner of man I am, let him put one of his guardsmen up against me." "By the shade of Milo, this is a bold fellow," cried the emperor. "How say you, Crassus, shall he make good his words?" "By your leave, Caesar," said the blunt soldier. "Good swordsmen are too rare in these days that we should let them slay each other for sport. Perhaps, if the barbarian would wrestle a foal." "Excellent," cried the emperor. "Here is the Python, and here Varus the lictor, each stripped for the bout. Have a look at them, barbarian, and see which you would choose. What does he say? He would take them both. Nay, then he is either the king of wrestlers or the king of boasters, and we shall soon see which. Let him have his way, and he has himself to thank if he comes out with a broken neck." There was some laughter when the peasant tossed his sheepskin mantle to the ground, and without troubling to remove his leathern tunic, advanced towards the two wrestlers. But it became uproarious when with a quick spring he seized the Greek under one arm and the Roman under the other, holding them as in a vice. Then with a terrific effort he tore them both from the ground, carried them writhing and kicking round the arena, and finally walking up to the emperor's throne, threw his two athletes down in front of him. Then, bowing to Caesar, the huge barbarian withdrew and laid his great bulk down among the ranks of the applauding soldiers, whence he watched with stolid unconcern the conclusion of the sports. It was still daylight when the last event had been decided, and the soldiers returned to the camp. The Emperor Severus had ordered his horse, and in the company of Crassus, his favorite prefect, rode down the winding pathway which skirts the Harpessus, chatting over the future dispersal of the army. They had ridden for some miles when Severus, glancing behind him, was surprised to see a huge figure which trotted lightly along at the very heels of his horse. "Surely this is Mercury as well as Hercules that we have found among the Thracian mountains," said he with a smile. "Let us see how soon our Syrian horses can outdistance him." The two Romans broke into a gallop and did not draw rein until a good mile had been covered at the full pace of their splendid chargers. Then they turned and looked back, but there, some distance off, still running with a lightness and a spring which spoke of iron muscles and inexhaustible endurance, came the great barbarian. The Roman emperor waited until the athlete had come up to them. "Why do you follow me?" he asked. "It is my hope, Caesar, that I may always follow you." His flushed face as he spoke was almost level with that of the mounted Roman. "By the god of war, I do not know where in all the world I could find such a servant," cried the emperor. "You shall be my own bodyguard, the one nearest to me of all." The giant fell upon his knee. "My life and strength are yours," he said. "I ask no more than to spend them for Caesar." Crassus had interpreted this short dialogue. He now turned to the emperor. "If he is indeed to be always at your call, Caesar, it would be well to give the poor barbarian some name which your lips can frame. Thecla is as uncouth and craggy a word as one of his native rocks." The emperor pondered for a moment. "If I am to have the naming of him," said he, "then surely I shall call him Maximus, for there is not such a giant upon earth." "Hark you," said the prefect, "the emperor has deigned to give you a Roman name since you have come into his service. Henceforth you are no longer Thecla, but you are Maximus. Can you say it after me?" "Maximin," repeated the barbarian, trying to catch the Roman word. The emperor laughed at the mincing accent. "Yes, yes, Maximin let it be. To all the world you are Maximin, the bodyguard of Severus. When we have reached Rome, we will soon see that your dress shall correspond with your office. Meanwhile march with the guard until you have my further orders." So it came about that, as the Roman army resumed its march next day, and left behind it the fair valley of the Harpessus, a huge recruit, clad in brown leather, with a rude sheepskin floating from his shoulders, marched beside the imperial troop. But far away in the wooden farmhouse of a distant Macedonian valley, two old country folk wept salt tears, and prayed to the gods for the safety of their boy who had turned his face to Rome.